Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. Today's topic of discussion is knowledge leadership to drive top line growth. And this webinar is being presented by Stratbeans. Let me quickly talk about and give you a brief about Stratbeans and Skillsoft. Now, Stratbeans is a leading e-learning company which provides a 360-degree digital transformation solutions to provide employee performance through e-learning products and solutions. Now, these solutions are online content digitization, learning management systems, knowledge management systems, and various platforms and tools for learning collaboration. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. So all the participants will be on mute, and that's for the entire session. If you have any questions during the presentation, just write them into the chat window or the Q&A box available in the control panel, and we will answer the questions during the last 15 minutes of the session. Let's just move ahead and let me quickly introduce our today's speaker, Mr. Subramanian, also known as Subbu. Subbu is a senior business and people practices leader, and he has worked with companies such as GE Capital, Bank of America, MetLife, and Sheraton's. He's also helped build organizations from ground zero in 5+ early stage startup organizations, scaling up to 15,000 plus FTEs. He's a certified Six Sigma and Lean professional. Subbu has championed 30+ projects for standardization, simplification, digitization, and innovation. Subbu loves building teams, empowering people to grow as leaders. So welcome, Subbu. Pleasure to have you here. But before we start, I have a quick poll question for all the participants who have joined us today, and here you go. So you should have the poll just right now. So let's just take around 30 seconds to a minute and see how many of you, as per you, think that your current organization demonstrates knowledge leadership? Okay, we already have responses coming in. That's great. I see 14 of you already responded. Let's just give it another few seconds and then I'll share the results. All right, so I see 75% of the participants have already voted. I'll go ahead and end the polling and let me just share the results with you. And these are interesting. So I see that 75% of you have answered yes, and 25% of you have answered no. So that's a great insight, and that will also help Subbu, take us ahead from here. And let me just go ahead and ask Subbu this question on what do you think is your definition of knowledge leadership? Over to you, Subbu.
Thank you, Rohit. Good morning, everybody. It's always a pleasure to interact with industry experts. Rohit, thank you so much for the generous introduction. God's been kind. I have been lucky. Have had a chance to look at businesses more, both from the front of the house as well as the back of the house. Have been doing customer-facing roles as well as the support roles. So it gives me immense pleasure to share some of the experiences and expertise that I have with all of you. The knowledge leadership, when we speak, and I know interestingly, the poll suggests that most people believe there is knowledge leadership. Now, in my own experience, knowledge leadership is an evolution. It is not something that is done over time. So to your question on what knowledge leadership is all about, I'm going to break it into two parts. One is, of course, at the individual level. At an individual level, whatever role you are doing in your organization, it is the ability to be able to connect the dots between what is happening within your organization, be it your function or outside of your function, and how that connects into a value proposition to the end customer. Now, if you are in a customer facing role, typically a sales or a customer service kind of a role, it is about being able to address a customer inquiry in a way that is satisfying the needs of the individual or the customer. Now, how does that happen? Now, knowledge, while you may, when you join an organization or when you join a team, you bring in certain transferable skills about a role. Now, what really is the litmus test is the contextual understanding of what is really happening within the organization, within your own organization. That contextual information about what is your product or service expected to contribute or add value to the organization is an important aspect of your success, your functional success, or your company success. Now, when we speak about knowledge leadership, largely people tend to think about their own knowledge and how it is helping their own function. But true knowledge leadership ecosystem is when every individual is just not knowing about what they do within, but how do they bring the entire organizational identity in front of the customer. So at an individual level, it is not just about knowing your own work, but also what others do. And therefore, when you are talking to a customer, you are able to process information. So when you are making a commitment to a customer, be it in terms of the features of your product or features of your service, and you're trying to address a customer need, when you commit something to the customer, your familiarity about your own organizational capabilities, the resources that are available, the people capabilities which are there, will give you the confidence and the body language to start showing in front of the customer. So true knowledge leadership at an individual level is when you're able to translate your understanding of your people, business, etc., into a customer value proposition. Now that is at the individual level. If you look at it from the organizational level, at the organizational level, no organization expects that, or rather should expect that an individual only understands their bit of the equation within the organization. Having a full view of what all happens, especially when it comes to some of the shifts that are happening in terms of external landscape, market preferences, even customer preferences, what are the technological advances that are happening? How is that impacting your own business, and what are some of the steps being taken at a strategic level? When that information is available to your team members within the organization, the confidence of people within, when they are talking to the end customer, is much higher. So I'm speaking a lot about all of this because knowledge leadership is all about being able to confidently connect the dots about knowledge, just not about within the organization, but also in the external landscape to create a value proposition to the customer. I'm going to take some instances to explain this better. You know, if you are in a sales role typically, or your salespeople, when they are talking to a customer, we have a beautiful product, we have an excellent service value proposition that we're talking. Now, the reality is that when you pitch to a customer, the percentage of people who will say yes in the first go is probably 5%, sometimes 10%. So it's never going to be a case where they are waiting for you to come and pitch your product or service, and the moment you finish your pitch, they're going to say, yes, I need this. I was waiting for you to come and talk to you about it. Give me a minute, please. Sorry. Okay, is my camera still moving? Is that all right?
Yeah, it looks
okay.
fun. So please go ahead.
So so where I was coming from is the sales. So about 5 to 10% is probably going to be, and I'm being very generous when I say 5 to 10%, where people will say yes in the first go. Then on the other extreme, we have about 5%, and this is research which suggests that 5% of the people who will say no right at the first go. So they are very clear, okay, I heard you. None of what you have said is going to be of use to me, and therefore I'm going to say no. Close to about 80% are going to say what we in sales call objections. Now, what are objections? They're obviously trying to understand your product service better. How is your product service better than the competitor? How is it going to help me? How is it going to, what is it that your product or service can do to not just do what you're saying, but something which is more than that? Now, that 70–80% of the objections needs to be addressed well. Whoever is interacting with the customer at that point in time must have a full understanding of what's really happening. So the commitments therefore made to that customer is a reflection of an organizational values, an organizational vision. And that becomes important. And therefore organizations have to continuously keep empowering their people to put the best foot forward when it comes to interacting with customers. The same that goes with even a customer service kind of a world, right? Even over there, when a customer is calling you and asking for a resolution, you need to be able to provide options to the customer to choose from. And where do the options come from? Only when you understand what are the different ways something can do. An important concept of customer service is all about service no. So many a times, good customer service is not just saying that, no, I cannot help you, hey, Mr. Customer, but here is what I can do. Customer service which is not helpful are basically areas where you just say, okay, I heard your request, but I cannot do what you're asking. So that's how the entire knowledge leadership empowerment of people within the organization comes into the picture. I hope that explains. Okay.
That was great insight, Subbu. I love the way you kind of explain the individual and the organization part, with the data that you presented. This was so informative. Now, I like to move, now that you've mentioned about its definition, how can this impact, the knowledge leadership impact in organization's success? So can you please elaborate on that?
Sure. So let me first start by quoting the great Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs has mentioned in one of his sayings, says that great things in business are never done by one person. This is obviously done by a team of people. So if you really look at it, it's got a very deep connotation, right? You have to create an entire ecosystem that empowers people to do their best to the end customer. So to the specific question about knowledge leadership helping an organization, the first thing I want to talk about is the ability to build superior products and services. How does that help? If your frontline people are representing or talking to the customers and understanding the market requirements, what is known typically as market sensing, the market sensing information rolls back into the leadership, which can then, and perhaps the marketing team, who are able to build superior products and services. Knowledge leadership plays an important role because if the frontline worker is not trained to pick those insights, then the top leadership is unable to know what is really happening. So there is that connect that happens out here. We already spoke about greater customer satisfaction. A customer is today, what is happening in today's world. For every product or a service that a customer is wanting to purchase, there are umpteen choices in the market. Now, if think about you and me, at least I can talk about myself, that if I have to buy even a cell phone, there are so many choices to choose from. So within a company, so even if I know which brand I need to go after, that brand has also got multiple variations of the same product. So how do I then make a choice? That is where knowledge leadership comes into the picture, when whoever is assisting is able to identify what is the customer need when it comes to a certain product, and then say, within this range, this is something that is going to be more useful to you versus the other. So the customer is happy saying that, look, so let me take an example. So a few years ago, I was called by one of the banks, a leading bank. I'm not going to take the name, to offer me a credit card, and they were trying to tell me that I will get access to golf courses and whatnot. So and therefore there is a fee to be paid and all of that. There's a whole lot of features that come about. So the question that comes to my mind is, how often do I go to a golf course? I don't go to a golf course because I don't have time to, I don't have accessibility. I stay far and so on and so forth. That is of no value to me. That particular type of credit card is not valuable to me at all. So I obviously said I don't need it. But guess what? The person never came back and told me that what is your need, and therefore can I offer you something else. When I went back later on into the bank's website, I did notice that there are certain products within the credit card segment which may be useful to me, but I didn't buy them because obviously they didn't talk to me about it. So primarily what I'm saying is that it's important for people to be empowered, and the knowledge leadership over there would have helped these people to find out my actual need, and perhaps they sell me an alternate option for me, which was not there, of course. The third part on how it helps an organization is employee satisfaction. When you have happy customers, the entire organization is vibrant, and there is more revenue coming in, which automatically starts rubbing on everybody's. It is rubbing on everybody, and therefore the employee satisfaction starts to change. Another benefit is about the shareholder value. At the end of it, your investors are going to be happy because it's going to improve your top line. And then if you have a good operational efficiency mechanism, it's also going to improve your bottom line as well, or your margins are going to improve. And then overall, you're creating a happier community around, because as your business grows, you're going to hire new people. When you're hiring new people, employment improves, and therefore the entire community starts to benefit. So there are larger, deeper connects on how knowledge leadership works for an organization. So not just within the organization, but also outside the organization, it creates an ecosystem which is beneficial for everybody.
Thank you. That's great, and such a lovely way to explain how it can impact an organization's success. Now, which actually brings up another question in my mind while I was listening to you. Now, we know that how it impacts the success, and we know the definition at an individual and an organization level. But, how have these organizations evolved as, knowledge leaders? Can you help us with that?
So if I understand your question, you're saying some of the organizations who have evolved as knowledge leaders, or what is it? What are the steps?
Yeah, how have these organizations evolved as knowledge leaders? So what has been the process? What have they gone through and all of that?
Sure. Okay. So that's a great question. So Another favorite of mine, favorite quote of mine is what Bill Gates talks about, right? Which is that success is a lousy teacher, right? And everybody knows that you learn a lot when there are failures, but success is a lousy teacher. What it does is it seduces smart people into thinking that they can't lose, right? So organizations, when they are in their early stages, there's a lot of energy that goes that goes inside, because the promoters or the co-founders or the early starters are using a lot of energy to get into building a value proposition to the organization. And once it starts becoming successful, as it starts to scale up, and new people come in, they're coming in because of the success that is already there. But guess what? Smarter people who have made that success possible can actually believe that they can win all the time. And that is where the challenge comes. How do you, most organizations fail when they are unable to empower or educate or provide the knowledge for the incoming people, right? When the new people come in, because the new people are not necessarily understanding the context in which your business has been successful. And that gap starts to widen when organizations scale up faster than what they can handle. So typically what happens is that you have hundreds of people joining in. You do have a process of making sure that everybody is equipped, and that's really expected to bring the entire ecosystem come up. But unfortunately, most organizations fail in there. When the scaling up is too fast, too quick, then everything starts to fall in place. And then suddenly you realize that it is not going to go the way that your early success is then started to question. So broadly, organizations, what they typically do is have, so what's required to be done is obviously make learning as a culture, right? So where everybody is, to create a culture where learning becomes the most important thing. So it's just not about new people learning, it's also about people who are existing, how can they learn from the people coming in? In my experience, there was we used to say that, when we hire people or we evaluate the individual on what else they bring to the table. So we're asking questions like, what have you done in your previous organization? What are some of the technologies you used, or what are the innovations that you're using? And in your mind, you're making a selection because you believe that all those new ideas are going to come and help in your organization. But guess what? The moment the person comes in, we give them a kind of a document which says, this is how things are done in our organization. Which means that as an organization, you are unwilling to change as per what the person is bringing in. The outside-in perspective that the person brings is always useful. So creating learning as a culture, having learning paths, which really looks at the cross-functional projects, also job rotations can create an ecosystem of that. How well is the coaching and mentoring working in your ecosystem? Are people willing to stop and provide feedback? How is your feedback mechanisms working? And then how is the grassroots engagement possible? So how big is the divide between the leadership and the grassroots work people, or the people who are in the front line? That really determines how well an organization is equipped to handle the knowledge management.
Okay, that sounds great. So if you want to summarize, and if you want to say, okay, if an organization has to start the journey of being a knowledge leader, so what are the, if you were to put it like a key factors, what would be the key factors to consider in this case?
Sure. So some of the key factors, I think, as I said, that so there has to be a learning strategy, right? So you have to make knowledge leadership as a strategic initiative or strategic imperative. Once that happens, then you also have what is known as the leadership mandate, right? So it's just not something which is a good to do, but it becomes every leader. So it's a top-down mandate that comes down, right? So making knowledge leadership as a strategic imperative makes it possible that way. The next thing is about hiring the right people, right? So people with the right skills, whether it is technical skills or even behavioral competencies. So having the right people. So when you hire right, you obviously manage easy, right? That's what they say. And once you have a learning culture which empowers learning teams, so you have to be able to empower your learning teams with the tools and resources. You have to provide the necessary budgets for them to create a learning environment. Perhaps be able to even partner with some of the B schools and create knowledge hubs, center of excellence, etc. So that is something which plays an important part. Communication, right? So it's just not a strategic imperative. On a regular basis, your entire organization needs to know what is really happening, what is the imperative, what has really happened thus far, and what are the next steps to be taken. So having a milestone, having a view of the milestone and encouraging people to help the organization reach that stage, that communication becomes important. Another aspect is to get into what is known as industry recognition, right? So industry recognition is just not about being recognized internally as an organization, which is in knowledge leadership, but to be able to impress the external bodies, get some external, nominate yourself for external awards, get evaluated, and then be part of the external awards. That again is a lot of validation to the knowledge leadership that you can demonstrate within an organization.
Awesome. That really helps, and I'm sure that answers me and all the participants here. Now we'll just take a pause here and see what our participants who've joined us today think about it. So let me just put another poll question up there, and this poll question is where I'm trying to understand is based on whatever you heard right away. Okay, just go ahead and rate your current organization's knowledge leadership on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1 being the lowest here and 5 being the highest. So yeah, I already have responses coming in. So let's just give this another minute. And I hope all of you, so we have 19 of you joining in. Yeah, 20 now. Let's see if we have 100% votes here. Okay, we are 40 seconds into the poll, and we have around 40% voted already. Come on, we need to make it 100% this time. Let's just give it another 30 seconds. All right, so we have majority of us voting in. I just end the poll here, and let's just see what it says. So as I've shared the results, I see most of you have said 4. So 36% of you have said that yes, knowledge leadership, that's what you rated your knowledge leadership in your organization. And Subbu, would you like to discuss about it? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So the good news is that at least this data, obviously it's a limited data with lower participation, it does indicate that 36%, which is a majority, which is mentioning that there is a good knowledge leadership system happening in their respective organizations. It's obviously a sample indicator, but if you really split it into 2, a tree is like a middle, right? So almost, if you divide it into 2 halves, 54% believe that there is the knowledge leadership is not as evolved, whereas 44% are saying that it's probably evolved. I'm talking about the fours and the fives, right? So that's the distribution that I see out here. Again, the numbers are, the sample size is not big enough for us to look at that. But largely what basically is coming about is that it's at the end of it, the majority of the organization is the majority of the people within the system, which kind of determines their confidence to be able to rate their respective system or respective organization. And this data is indicating that there are opportunities for some organizations to keep building on knowledge leadership over and over again.
Great, great. That sounds great. And while I was looking at it again, now this brings up another question in my mind: is that what are those tools and resources that are available in the market for companies that they can consider to empower their employees and be a more knowledge leader centric organization?
That's interesting. Remarkably or interestingly, most organizations don't necessarily have a branded product within the system. So, and that's what is a remarkable thing on that, right? So there are obviously certain homegrown job aids, cheat sheets, reference documents that get built. Some of them are manual, some of them are in the electronic format. One way or the other, it tries people. So there's a dependency for people to be in front of their desk, in front of their PCs, to be able to access it when they are talking to the customers. So that's really what most organizations really do. Then there are also organizations who have evolved into developing what is popularly known as a knowledge management system. And that is something which is also existing, and people take extracts out of it and they are able to use it. But very few organizations have solutions which are mobile in nature. So somebody who is going into a remote town to sell a tractor to a farmer, how does that individual who probably has lower bandwidth be able to provide the answers to the farmer out there? So that is something which is very limited in my experience. So anything which is mobile in nature is something which is, and there are also very few organizations who have such tools made available to their customers. Right.
Thank you so much for your insights here. Now, can I quickly show you a video that I just pulled out of GoPerform app? Now, if you allow me, Subbu, this application of Stratbeans, helps in performance support. This is a performance support application, and it's widely used by organizations. I would say it's a Google of an organization.
Sure.
So, yeah, so I'll just go ahead and share that with everyone present here so they can get a quick insight of this tool. thank you so much for the patience of watching this small video. Now, another question for you, Subbu, here is, now we've
I do want to
seen,
add something, if I may.
yes, sure, please go ahead.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting tool. I'm happy that there is something like this built by Stratbeans, and especially in today's world where technology becomes the fulcrum of every solution that we provide. The fact is that there is this mechanism of AIs and MLs which are used to build such an app. I want to share one or two incidents about what I recently experienced. I obviously consult some organizations and I have a network of people. And I do want to share an instance where, with if knowledge leadership had been there, what would have been different? Again, it is nothing to go with what I do. I had a set of friends who were looking for a solution, and they happened to reach out to me and say, Subbu, do you know of anybody who can provide a particular solution? I immediately got reminded. So what was the context? The context was, and I'm taking real time because there is what do you call it? It was a Sunday, and these guys were wanting to do something to their customers, and they had signed up with a slightly large established organization. And guess what? They had some problems, and they were unable to reach anybody in that particular organization. That's when they called me and said, Subbu, do you know of anybody else? Because I had happened to mention to them at some stage that if you're looking for any alternatives, let me know. So they said that, look, we are in a bit of a problem. So can you refer us to the other company? And I was glad to connect both of them. And I said, look, you both talk to each other. If you find value proposition between one another, go ahead and do it. But I'm just letting you know. In about an hour or so, I got a message saying that, thank you so much. Great people. They responded. And later in the evening, I came to know that their ecosystem kind of rallied together and they wanted to do a demo of the product. And on a Sunday, they had people doing that. Immediate sign off, all was done. This was on a Sunday. On Wednesday, I started to get some feelers saying that, by the way, everything is good, but there are certain issues that are happening in the way this is happening. So I said, okay, fine, no problem. I kept quiet. I said, look, at the end of it, you have done your due diligence. I'm fine. And on Thursday, I got a final confirmation that the deal is off. Simply because they were obviously trying to set up the system, and the help desk people were unable to address some of the problems that this customer was facing. And the customer was from the south. Their understanding of Hindi was a bit of a problem. And the other guys would not speak other than Hindi or very little English. Now, for me, it was a huge moment because it took less than 4 days for a customer to being completely odd to saying that, look, we can't do business anymore. Why I'm saying this is because if that organization had made sure that you have the right people in, and those people were empowered to provide the solution that the customer is wanting, that account would have been saved. And you and I know today, with so much of choices, it takes a lot of effort to acquire one client than lose one client, manage a client. So that's what I wanted to kind of share, and how important it becomes to get knowledge leadership right up to the front line.
Sure, I completely agree. And this case study that you presented is, it's really interesting and shocking as well on how it can impact in a big way to organizations. And that is where, the money comes in. So I just want to ask you, how one can, one can measure the, ROI of knowledge leadership. So how do we measure that?
Yeah, so if you have a good knowledge leadership ecosystem happening, you will be able to see tangible benefits. One of the most tangible one is the top line growth. So your revenues, increase in revenue starts to show up. Your business growth, both organic and inorganic, is something that can easily be measured. Those are hard measures. You cannot deny that. Again, as I said, that if you have a good operational efficiency going, it will also result in improved margins or the bottom line growth, right? It starts to, when you start measuring your customer satisfaction score, or in some organizations they do the net promoter score or the NPS, you'll start seeing that those scores start becoming better and better, right? The other thing that you can measure, the ROI that you can measure, is on how is your market share improving, right? So that's the other indicator of how well customers are accepting your product or your service. So that's a market share which is happening. We of course spoke on the shareholder value, because higher revenue, higher profitability, therefore shareholder value is improving. And then of course you can even measure the level of engagement that your employees have or the satisfaction you have. And all of these is obviously an ROI that can easily be measured, quantified, and then you can start saying, you can start talking about how you are doing, how you're looking at cost savings or cost avoidance kind of a situation, and how your top line growth is increasing, and your number of people who are successful in the front line starts to show higher numbers. I think these are some of the ROIs that one can easily look into.
Those are quite a few. So I could
There are
have never
plenty,
imagined so many.
Yeah, I'm talking about the top 5 or 6, and there are several ancillary benefits, connected benefits that starts happening as well. Think about the camaraderie that will start to show up within the organization, right? Remember, when you are successful, lots of people want to be with you. When you are not, then people tend to start drifting away, right? So that whole thing starts. There is so much of energy that is induced within the system. The enthusiasm to do different things. Innovation starts to flow. Um, you know, the Godrej GoCool product came because at the front line, somebody thought that electricity is not a commodity easily available for the villages, so you can't sell refrigerators there. So the innovation comes from that side. It does not have to come sitting in a boardroom, right? So that's really what it all translates into.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Subbu, for that insight again. Now, I like to understand what participants think about it. So let me just put up another poll question for you guys. And this one's where I'm talking about. So let me just pull up that poll. And then, yeah. So you should have it up on your screens now. So on a rating of scale 1 to 5 again, how do you rate your organizational readiness to demonstrate knowledge leadership in the next, say, 12 or 24 months? So go ahead and put in your words. Okay, we have people started voting. Great. Okay, 30 seconds remaining. Okay, we have 45% of you voting in. Let's just see if we can get 70%. All right,
Yeah, I
so
suppose.
we have majority of the results coming in. It's around 60%. Yeah, let's just give it another. So I have a few more coming in. Let's just give it another 15 seconds. All right, perfect. And there you go. So these are the results. Again, this lands up to 4 as well. So what do you think, Subbu?
Absolutely. The good thing is that today what it basically tells me is that today there is recognition that knowledge is supreme and it is important to empower people. So a lot of organizations are working towards that. This is an indicator of that. Some organizations obviously recognize it and they are unable, they are probably still working towards that goal. Again, it's a maturity curve, as I always mention. Sometimes it is just not easy for organizations to get it started from day one, because day one, it's also about demonstrating how the product or service is useful and be able to get the right investments, etc. And once you have a scaling up happening, that's when you start doing it. So that's what it tells me, that based on the maturity curve of the organizations, you will have the results going up and down. But the good thing is that organizations believe that it is an important aspect of an organizational growth. That's what it tells me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Subbu. You've shared wonderful insights. And just a quick time check, we're 45 minutes into the session. And there have been a lot of knowledgeable insights from you on knowledge leadership. And I'm sure participants would have benefited from it. Now, I would request participants to share their questions in chat or the Q&A box for Subbu so we can take it up and answer them for you. So either you can put it in the Q&A box, you can see the Q&A box in the control panel on your bottom of the window, or you can put them into the chat window right away.
Seem to be having a very quiet group.
Okay, it seems like we have the first question coming in. And this one says, how companies who are not knowledge centric may struggle?
Okay. So everything that we spoke about are the benefits of having having knowledge leadership works the reverse, right? The largest or the companies which are still evolving into a knowledge leader is obviously going to look at situations where customers are overcommitted and the actual performance is under or is below par. So that will obviously start resulting in customer dissatisfaction, lower sales, top line starting to reduce, and therefore impacting profitability and sometimes even the organization's ability to scale up. So that's really what is likely to happen there, right? It's going to have a ripple effect, employees feeling dissatisfied, and a whole lot of things that can happen. Innovation starts to reduce. People start doubting each other, doubting their own capabilities. So the focus, therefore, then starts shifting from bringing the organization ahead to how do I save my job or how do I get into my new job somewhere else, is what becomes the focus, right? So those are things that can have an impact as an organization.
Great, I hope that answers. And I don't see any more questions coming in, so let's just wait for, okay. So we have a question coming in. How a startup organization can focus on building knowledge leadership culture?
That's a very good question. Startups typically, obviously, when you have a startup, the struggle is resources, right? Especially how much dollars you can invest in creating an ecosystem or being able to invest in products and tools and services, etc. The good news is that a startup which is fairly small, the control is very much within the promoters or the small group of people who are there. So, and each one of them is bringing a unique set of competencies which they can share. So the important thing is for having a regular communication or some form of an orientation where people who know things about this product or the services are teaching the others. So, for example, somebody who is in marketing can actually teach the finance person what is really happening. A finance person can actually teach the marketing person how to look at the ROIs and how to look at the business angle of the decisions that are being made. So a lot of interactions. The good thing, as I said in the startup, is because the number of people are small, they can just sit together over a coffee and start talking about various things. And I think that's the best way of doing this over here.
Great. That's a great idea, and
And
I think that
right. Sorry. And the important thing is that recognizing that it is going to be a key differentiator, which means that if you kind of create a blueprint of what is really going to happen whenever a new individual is coming and joining the team, so that they don't get left behind. Typically, what happens is when somebody comes in new into an existing system, they are lost in what is really happening, because the entire ecosystem is so far ahead and you are behind. How fast you can bring that person up to speed becomes an important aspect. So you need to have a blueprint for that as well.
Okay. So next question is where we have Sanjay coming in and saying, within an organization, in your opinion, wouldn't you say that there would be multiple roles, that of knowledge receiver and of the knowledge giver?
Yes, of course. There is always going to be a knowledge receiver and a knowledge giver. As I said, no single person is a master of everything, right? So I may be a great doctor, but I'm not a great engineer. So and I may be a great accountant, but I may not necessarily be a great marketing person. So my ability to stay open and learn about what is really happening around me it is important, right? So one, I gather knowledge about something that I don't know, and I'm also able to share knowledge to people who don't know what I am doing. So it's obviously a two-way traffic, yes.
Okay, I hope that answers for you, Sanjay. Sanjay has another question saying, the type of leadership of an organization, would that not be a major factor to knowledge centricity of an organization? For example, an autocratic leader may not really encourage open communication and exchange of knowledge.
So true, and such a valid observation. The, this is where the leadership endorsement starts to become an important factor on that, right? Um, the fact of the matter is that if you have it's not so much about the autocratic leader, but it's also about what I said is whether it is part of the strategic imperatives of the organization. As long as the leader recognizes that it is important that people have to stay ahead of the curve for the organization to survive, it becomes easier for the entire ecosystem to behave along that. Now, there is very little one can actually do about the autocratic leader, but I suppose that you need to start looking at who else the autocratic leader is leaning up to and see if you can have influencers to talk to that individual. And that becomes the way to deal with this particular situation.
So Sanjay says, I actually mean leadership styles really, but he also acknowledges and says, thank you for responding. So yeah, so I hope that answers, and that's a great way to get started, Sanjay. And there's another participant coming in, and he has this question saying, is there an assessment template or a module that would help to know knowledge and sharing possibility of person as individual and team that will help them train?
So if I understand, so is there an assessment template module that will help to know knowledge and sharing possibility of person as individual and team that will help to train them? So Normally, these are looked at from a behavioral interviewing perspective. If you are able to use the behavioral event interviewing to find out how has an individual helped others grow, how has the individual created an ecosystem where each one is learning from one another. Um, if you have those individuals talk about the instances, you are able to gauge whether the individual falls into sharing their knowledge and possibility of the individual. Um, Assessment template or a module can be created. In my view, those remain academic. What's important is to have conversations and give people the opportunity to provide instances where they have done that. That would be more effective in my view.
Great. I hope that answers for you. And yeah, so again, we're just 4 minutes into the session, and I'd like to quickly see if anybody has one last question. All right, Sanjay has another question saying, so Subbu, should an organization really have a full-time knowledge manager, or would it just be effective to give another hat to a holder?
That's an interesting question. Um, a good so if you have knowledge leadership as one of the imperatives of your organization, one of the ways to enable this, or the best way to enable this, is to have somebody who is responsible to focus on that, right? And therefore, the benefit of having a full-time knowledge manager slash leader to manage that, because then that individual is spending quality time in finding opportunities, options existing in the system, and creating a learning path for their own team members. So that is something which is possible. Now, where organizations do not have this as a strategic imperative, there is a tendency for people to double hat on this. Is that effective? I have seen organizations who have been successful in that. I have also seen organizations who have not been successful in that. And people who have been successful, in my experience, are people who are where again learning or knowledge is a key factor. It may not be part of the strategic imperative, but there is a general culture, a learning culture, which is established within the organization. And the reverse is true in organizations where people have not found the success. That's because the individual's effectiveness or other is being measured on the business imperatives rather than the knowledge imperatives that are happening within the organization. So that really is the answer. I know it's not a straight answer, but I want to say that it is really effective. But that's how it is.
Okay, I hope that answers for you, Sanjay. Sanjay has another question. So let's just take this as the last question as we're running out of time. I'm so sorry to say that, but we can always connect and talk about it. So last question from Sanjay saying, but in an organization where there is an independent knowledge manager, isn't there a chance that he slides into a mold wherein he falls behind in his own learning?
So I don't think that's true. The fact of the matter is that there are two aspects for anything, right? So if you are a knowledge manager, you need to continuously keep sharpening your saw. So therefore, there's a time that has to be allocated for your own learning, even as you're planning for the learning of your entire organization. So it's the balance that the knowledge manager has to create for himself or herself to be able to manage as well. I don't recommend that own learning is sacrificed for the purpose of the larger organizational learning. It's important to keep both of them balanced.
Okay, so thank you so much, Subbu, for answering that. And Sanjay, not a bother at all. You can ask as many questions as you want. We're more than happy to answer them for you anytime. All right, so this kind of brings us to the end of this webinar. And thank you once again, Subbu, for sharing your experience. We've learned a lot from today's session from you. We will be sharing this webinar recording with you and all the participants here in this session. Thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. We hope to see you again next time. We will make sure that you're on the invitee list. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write us at deepa@stratbeans.com. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and please have a wonderful day. Stay
Thank
safe,
you for
stay
having me,
healthy.
Rohit. Thank you for having
Thank
me,
you so
Rohit.
much.
Thank you for having me, Stratbeans. Thank you, Deepa, for coordinating this.